And now Reverend Sabrina Trupia will present her message, Won't You Be My Neighbor?
Good morning. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. As Marianne said, my name is Sabrina Trupia, and today I want to talk to you about hospitality because that's what I thought the theme of the month was. But in retrospect, it's like love and hospitality are very close together. Yikes. So we just read the children's story of the fox and the stork, which is said in many different ways. And in this case, it was about being a good friend. But in some cases, it's told about demonstrating the golden rule, which is do unto others like you would want to be done unto you. And I take issue with the fact that that's a good demonstration of the golden rule, because that's when the golden rule goes south, it goes bad, because the trick that the fox played on the stork was based on knowing what wouldn't work. So the fox knew what to do unto others, but did not use it. And the conclusion of this was that they saw how each other ate and adapted. The point being that the stork, the point being that the trick that the fox played on the stork was due to the fact that the stork did not know any better than how she ate. She did not know anything outside her experience, and that was possible to play a trick on her because she was limited by her own worldview. Once she learned differently, she could play the trick back. But how can we know what we don't know? I mean, this is an important question, specifically for Unitarian Universalists, because our UU values include interconnectedness and generosity. But how hard is it to live into them? I mean, really live into them. I mean, do we always welcome the stranger? Always, always? And when we do, what is our welcome like? Is it likely to make people feel welcome? Does it connect us with one another? Is it a loving welcome? Look, I don't mean to imply that UU spaces aren't welcoming. They are. That UU people aren't welcoming, because you all are, and I've been in UU spaces that are plenty welcoming and great for me. But I'm talking about the fact that we're all human. And when we say all are welcome, sometimes we still leave someone out. And that doesn't mean we're bad at welcoming. It's a case of both and. We can be better at welcoming, and we want to be better at welcoming, and we will still make mistakes. For instance, shortly after I became a regular in my home church of Alton, where I'm still a member, I felt I wanted to contribute to a monthly program that fed the food insecure in the area. But I was really afraid of showing up. I wanted to help, but I didn't want to be there. Because I am and I was an introvert, and the thought of 50 to 75 to sometimes 100 hungry strangers being in the fellowship hall and me not knowing what to do was a little daunting. I had preconception as to what would happen during these lunches. But encouraged by my friends, at the church, I tried to participate in the way any normal person would. I made an absurd amount of potato salad, like 10 pounds of potato salad, dropped it off, and ran away, right? That's a normal way to react to things. A potato salad is the right response, right? No, not really, kind of wrong. This was my mistake in trying to show hospitality. Even when I was trying to do good for our neighbors, I was thinking that my potato salad was the most important part of my contribution, instead of thinking that my participation was the most important part of my contribution. Mind you, the potato salad was appreciated. People needed it. I made it because it was in the sign-up sheet, but it wasn't the only thing that was needed. The month following, cautiously and still more than a bit afraid, I showed up once again to this lunch to see how I could help. And this time I stayed. And eventually, over time, I did what the other volunteers were doing. I grabbed whatever courage I had, and I sat down with our guests and ate a meal family style with them. It took a long time, but as time passed, I started volunteering every month and eating with our guests every month. And I showed up not just to serve, but to participate, because showing up transformed me. And this transformation, I didn't realize that it was happening. I didn't clearly realize that it was happening until I sat down at a table with Larry. I had met him early on, an older gentleman with long hair tied into a ponytail. Larry told me he worked at the Salvation Army, like many of the guests did. And in more than one occasion, he acted as the unofficial liaison between the volunteers and the guests, especially when things got a little rowdy, a little out of hand. That tended to happen sometimes when there were many people. While I didn't know for certain that his life had been or probably still was rough, given the fact that he participated to these lunches as a guest and the sadness in his eyes, I could only assume that things were not well on a pretty regular basis. And then I had a confirmation of that, because one day he came in late, disheveled, no ponytail, confused, looking upset. It wasn't typical for him. He always had a smile and a kind word, and he called everybody darling. So I got curious, what was up with them? So I did the only thing I could do, which was to sit down at his table and eat with him and the other friends to find out. For the first few minutes, the whole group bantered about the weather and sports, and Larry just sat there, silent, eating his lunch. I'm pretty sure he was crying. And then, in a pause in the conversation, Larry finally spoke, asking me a question pointedly. Do you believe in Jesus? Yeesh, Larry, that's not an easy question. How do you mean believe in Jesus? I felt a bit guarded. I did not know what the acceptable answer could be for him. I'm a Unitarian Universalist, right? Like you got to know the audience. But before I could say anything further, like I believe that there was a historical Jesus, blah, 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 my whole spiel, he said, well, do you believe in heaven and hell, in the church, in the Bible, in Jesus? What does this church believe in? Oh, okay. He's asking whether Unitarian Universalism can help him with meaning making. He is at a tough position in his life right now. He came in sad and unwilling to talk. And so he wanted to answer the big questions in life, or as we say in my line of work, he wanted to construct his theology. So at that point, I had a choice. I could just get up and busy myself with something else. After all, I was a volunteer. There's always something to do, a dish to wash, that kind of thing. Or choose to be curious and vulnerable and maybe start something, maybe start a connection. So the reason I'm telling you this story is because I decided to be vulnerable. What followed was a kind of a theological discussion between me and Larry, and how, as UUs, we believe that there are many different paths to truth and meaning, and maybe some paths have heaven and hell in them, and some other paths do not. Soon others at the table joined in. We discussed the founders of the UU faith. We discussed Ralph Waldo Emerson, which just about anyone of any stripe knows who he is. And as the theological, spiritual conversation continued, I had a aha moment. We all have the same spiritual needs. As a sidebar, a cornerstone of my beliefs has to do with the belief that there is always a point of spiritual connection between humans, all humans being our spiritual beings, even those who are not formally religious. And it doesn't matter whether they come from privilege and they have time to study, or if they need help with their meals or their personal care items. It is not merely possible but necessary to connect on a spiritual basis with the people in our lives. And now I've seen this time and time again, but the first time I truly understood that was during that conversation. And I hope that one day I might be able to discuss my beliefs and my theology with you at length, but the relevant point to this consideration for today is that that moment of understanding between me, Larry, and the other people happened because I let myself be transformed by the presence of our guests. Larry and others who shared their wisdom and their lived experience transformed me. I had been changed by deciding to make a connection. So, one of the better quotes about how hospitality is the key to interconnection comes as a form of a tweet that I found a long time ago by the late Reverend Beth Ellen Cooper, of blessed memory. The tweet said, quote, "Radical hospitality is not simply welcoming all comers. It is willing to be changed by those who show up. It is willing to be changed by those who show up." That seems like a lot. Isn't it enough that we open our doors? Must we be radical too now? Well, let me illustrate. I'm going to rely on another colleague, UU educator, facilitator, and all-around great human, C.B. Beale. C.B. Beale tells a story similar to the fable of Fox and the Stork, except this is about humans and ice cream. We can all relate to humans and ice cream. In fact, if you Google the words C.B. Beale and ice cream sundae party, you can get a video with C.B. telling the story I'm about to tell you. C.B. says it's so much better because it's their story. I recommend you watch it at some point and maybe go for ice cream afterwards, I don't know. So, C.B. tells us about a guy who decides to have an ice cream party and invites all his neighbors. All are welcome, he says. Nice, right? Ice cream sundae, all are welcome. All can come. Alas, much like the stork, all he knows about ice cream is what he likes, which consists of two flavors, yes, both flavors, chocolate and vanilla. Not much of an ice cream sundae party, is it? I mean, it's better than nothing, but is it a party? What about people who like other flavors? Maybe those who like the non-dairy ice cream. What about them? And won't anyone think of the toppings, for crying out loud? There were no toppings in his party. I like toppings. Of course, ice cream guy doesn't really mean to exclude, right? He is not a jerk. He wanted to invite all, right? Much like the stork, like I said, he was working from his own viewpoint only. And this is an important point for a variety of reasons, but one of them is because sometimes the lack of ill intent can be used as a justification to not be sufficiently welcoming. I am sure we all know places where perhaps they say all are welcome, but only if you do certain things, believe certain things, and become like certain people. These places, and yes, churches are in this group, are like the ice cream guy, only knowing what they know and no further. They don't want to learn anything else. But then they say, we tried to be welcoming, but then nobody came. And they stop it there. These places and the ice cream guy can do better, don't we agree? So C.B. Beale uses this story to introduce us to the concept of preemptive radical inclusion, which is a method to improve the inclusion of everyone in programs through our own curiosity about who shows up and why. CB writes, quote, "Preemptive radical inclusion is a framework for liberation and justice. Preemptive because as leaders we are responsible to figure out in advance how to involve everyone in the experience or meeting or activity, and we make those changes without attendees having to make their needs met. The word radical is there in the middle because if leaders are doing this correctly, the created experience won't be the expected experience. It might even be radically different. And inclusion doesn't simply mean that we include others in our circle of what we already do and how we do it, but expand the experience to encourage deep involvement and make that involvement possible, accepting ideas from others, I may say. And then CB concludes by saying, quote, "Evidence of our success is not more people in attendance, is that we ourselves have changed." Not more people in attendance, but we ourselves have changed, unquote. So we must be curious, we must be willing to be changed by others. If we apply this concept to the ice cream story, clearly, ice cream guy cannot think of all the flavors or all the toppings in the world, right? Just like congregations, you and not you cannot think of all the different people who show up and their different needs. But what's different about it, what makes this a practice and a spiritual practice, I might add, is the fact that preemptive radical inclusion changes us. Ice cream guy would have to change enough to ask himself, wait, what other ice cream is out there other than what I like? Or what do other people like? Or still, how can others contribute and not just participate? You see, because when we change ourselves to an attitude of curiosity and openness, we can get insights on what people need, what they want, and what we can offer. And we change by being with each other, making the connection when we find out more about one another. You see how this is a process that has no fixed arrival point, no destination, right? So getting back to the Aesop fable that we read in the children's moment, at the end of the story, the fox and the stork, who are friends, did unto others as they would like to be done to them. They switched, they got the right plates. This is known as the platinum rule because it's better than the golden rule. The platinum rule involves changing ourselves through relationship. When we are willing to change, we truly can welcome all. Not just the vanilla or chocolate flavors. We have room for butter pecan and maybe even squid ink ice cream. It's a thing. So now you might say, okay, fine, that's all great, but I'm not a leader. I'm not trying to organize an ice cream party. I don't even like ice cream. It's fall. I mean, it's hot today, but can we apply this to our everyday life? Can we be good neighbors day to day? Hit it, Stephen. If you use Ed Saints, Fred Rogers would be the patron saint of radical hospitality. Mr. Rogers always said that if we feel loved, chances are that we will be loving to others. That is how a connection is made, and that is why so many adults, including me, still think about the things we learned from him. So let's look at what he does with his show. He welcomes us into his home and then invites us to explore the neighborhood with him, because he wants to learn about his neighbors. He wants to learn about the things they do and how they feel about things. He wants to be changed by his neighbors by being curious about his neighborhood. Curiosity and connection. No ice cream party necessary. I said earlier that inclusive hospitality is a spiritual practice. Spiritual because inevitably, when you're thinking of making a lasting change, we work on changing our worldview and our beliefs. And that is a spiritual change. And it is a practice because it is a process that we have to repeat, and we need to keep at it. So radical hospitality is willing to be changed by those who show up. Radical inclusion means being forever on a path of curiosity and spiritual learning. And you know what? This is not about ice cream or getting more people in the pews or at an event. This is not about self-improvement. This is about all of us radically welcoming all of us with more love, more generosity, and a deeper sense of the interconnectedness of everything. May it be so, and blessed be.